When you look at the documents, the court documents in this case, and you see the instances, for example, at the Psychiatric Institute of Washington, where he attacks a woman and leaves her bleeding and threatens to challenge another member of the staff. Or you look at the Montgomery County record, when he's at Suburban Hospital and he resists police and ends up getting in a struggle. He gets on the sexual registry because he is engaged in deviant sexual behavior with a 17-year-old minor. What Agent Valdivia saw in his eyes and in his body language is exactly consistent with what many others, innocent victims, had to suffer in other circumstances. They didn't have the training, they didn't have the perception, they didn't have the ability to predict his tendencies, and they suffered the consequence. In this case, it was Mr. Slaughter who suffered the consequence of his own actions. This is an ill-founded indictment, and we look forward to the day when 12 people can take a look at it and decide it on its merits.
Why is it relevant to the background history of the alleged victims?
It's going to be relevant for two purposes. One, when he says, this is what I perceive, this is what I saw in this man, this is the potential I saw, it is corroborated by his history, Mr. Slaughter's history. You know, if Mr. Slaughter didn't have that kind of a history, it would be a different situation. But the agents trained. What he saw was corroborated by the history of this individual. And it also can be very relevant if Mr. Slaughter, if the state dares to call Mr. Slaughter as a witness in this case, then we're going to get into a lot of this stuff as well. There's just no reason for Mr. Slaughter to have turned around and approached Agent Valdivia, who was cornered in a Metro car with no place to go. He had been seated and minding his own business.
Was there any other action that your client could have taken less than what was potentially lethal force? I mean, did he not have any other base or anything else?
He had no other weapons on him, and this is the problem sometimes that, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking is great, but so he didn't take any action. What could have happened? This guy was bigger, taller. Agent Valdivia was in a unfavored position, seated with his back to the wall in a Metro car with no place to go. And so what do? You wait for this man who is acting in the manner in which he was to go hands-on with you, and then you have a gun right here that's in a loose holster, and you're going to engage him and let him potentially get it. Well, the law doesn't require you to take that risk, either as an FBI agent or as an ordinary citizen.
What is your client's employment status?
As is the case with any law enforcement officer who gets charged with a felony, he's on a suspended status without pay.
As of when?
I don't know whether it was, what the exact date, sometime in the last few days.
You said without?
That's the way it normally is with a felony charge when you're a law enforcement officer. He has a family. I don't want to get into the personal part of his family because...
I want to understand a little bit more of what actions by Mr. Slaughter caused Mr. Valdivia to believe that this was a premonition, simply an act for money or what?
Yeah, this asking for money stuff, you know, but that's the front part. There's two parts to this. The first part is where Mr. Slaughter approaches him and asks him for money. My client's, you know, he gives him a fist bump, basically says, go on your way. And then Slaughter ends up mouthing off. And he turns a while, and then my client says, no, you know, watch your mouth. And then he comes back, and he literally gets in his face. You heard the prosecutor say he was within 2 to 3 feet. That's arm's length. That's fighting length. You don't wait under those circumstances for things to happen. And he didn't have to. Now, you can predict any kind of a scenario you want, but the scenario that you don't have to face is somebody grabbing your gun and using it against you. And we know from Mr. Slaughter's history that if he had a gun in his hand, he would be totally unpredictable as to what he was going to do.
Did your client ever identify himself prior to shooting as an FBI agent?
You know, that's an interesting question because at least one of the witnesses seems to suggest he did. Agent Valdivia remembers telling this individual to back off or I'm going to shoot, but he doesn't recall that he identified himself as an agent. No, at that point it was no big deal. I mean, he was just figuring this guy's going to go on his way, but then things turned. And look at the stuff that's in our press release. Look at these documents in other cases, and you can see how Mr. Slaughter turned on people like that.
If you're going to continue to argue Mr. Slaughter's history, does that mean that if he gets added to the
Well, I don't think you can take the facts and change them and ask what would happen. It is his history that caused him to behave the manner in which he did, and that permitted a trained agent to perceive the danger that was presented. So you can't pull a fact out and then ask what would happen.
Law enforcement before?
I'm sorry?
Did he work for law enforcement before?
No, he was in public health. He was doing public health work. He has a degree in public health.
He said he's never fired his weapon before.
He's never in the line of duty. Obviously, he's fired it at the range to qualify,
Has he
but
ever had any use of force since his
as far as I know, he has not, but I can't tell you for sure that I know that.
You're talking to press release about just normal people and law enforcement encountering folks who were potentially dangerous. You want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, they do it all the time, and sometimes they have to react. And if you've ever been to police defensive training programs, they have what they call the 21-foot rule, which says, you know, if you wait to react, you're in trouble. Action is better than reaction, and so it is you don't wait when you're arm's length away to see if a guy's going to sucker punch you. You know, it just doesn't happen that way. So this is consistent with traditional police defensive tactic training, and it's also consistent with an ordinary person's common sense.
Could you talk to us about how he's doing right now, Mr. Valdez?
He's stoic. He can't believe that this has happened to him, for him taking actions simply to defend himself. So flabbergasted understates or minimizes the way he feels, but I'm sorry? No, I mean, from the very beginning, he's been cooperative. Within 2 weeks of this happening, we called up the state's attorney's office, said, look, we want to help you close this thing out. We met with them and an investigator, no deals, no understandings, an open conversation, and explained to them everything that happened. We've been at their beck and call for anything that they wanted along the way. Oh, not until the last few days or week when we were notified that this was forthcoming. I think it changed recently to 40 years. All right, anything else?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We don't have access to everything. I don't know. I know there was one other individual who has some very helpful information about his perception of what happened in terms of Mr. Slaughter's threatening behavior. There was some indication there might have been somebody else in the back of the car. I don't know for sure if that's the case or not.
Mr. Bonsib, I'm sorry. In terms of the reckless endangerment, the state's attorney said that there was a person on the other side in the line of fire that was recklessly endangered by Mr. Valdez's fire.
And that's what they say. And clearly, I think the evidence will show that there was a passenger in that position. So, you know, whether that is a crime, we'll see. But I don't think it is. If you have a right to defend yourself under those kinds of instantaneous situations, he didn't recklessly endanger a citizen. And so their theory has got to, you know, fall for all four counts one way or the other.